Maybe you know. Science meets the questions you never thought to ask. Paris, 1918. A woman named Madame M walks into a police station and tells the officer her husband has been kidnapped. He has been replaced, she says, by an identical impostor. Same face, same voice, same scar above his eyebrow. But is not him. Over the next 5 years, she counts the doubles. By 1923, she believes 80 people in her life have been swapped. Her children, her neighbors, even her own reflection. And she is not delusional in any other way. To understand what was happening inside Madame M's mind, you first have to understand a small miracle your brain pulls off every second of your waking life. You walk into a coffee shop. You scan 20 faces in less than a second. One of them is your sister. You do not think about it. You just know. That recognition is so fast, so automatic, that we never notice it. We feel like seeing is one thing. But seeing a face is actually two things stitched together so seamlessly you cannot tell them apart. The first is the cold identification. Eyes spaced this far apart, nose this shape, jaw this width. A facial map. The second is harder to describe. It is a tiny warmth that arrives when the face is someone you love. A flicker of safety. A sense that this person belongs to you. Most people will live their entire lives without ever noticing the difference between these two signals. But once those two signals come apart, once your brain can see the face but cannot feel the face, the world starts to break in a way no one is prepared for. In 1923, a French psychiatrist named Joseph Capgras was working at the Saint-Anne Hospital in Paris when Madame M was brought to him. She had spent 5 years convinced she was surrounded by doubles. Her real husband, she insisted, was being held somewhere in the cellars of the city. The people who came to visit her in the hospital were not her family. They were strangers wearing her family's faces. Capgras and his younger colleague Jean Reboulechoux wrote up her case. They called it l'illusion de socies, the illusion of doubles. They were stunned by one detail. Madame M was, in every other way, lucid. She could do arithmetic. She remembered her childhood. She could describe her impostors with photographic precision. She just could not accept that they were a family. For decades, psychiatrists filed Capgras Syndrome under psychosis. They assumed it was an exotic branch of schizophrenia, a fault somewhere in the machinery of belief. But that explanation never quite worked, because most patients with Capgras have no other delusions. The double is the only thing they get wrong. And for 60 years, no one could explain why. Here is what we now think is happening. Tucked behind your right ear, in a strip of cortex called the fusiform gyrus, sits a neighborhood of cells whose only job is to recognize faces. This is your facial map system. It tells you the geometry. From there, a signal is supposed to fire down into the limbic system, specifically a small almond-shaped, not called the amygdala, which colors that face with feeling. Mom, safety, love, or fear, or attraction. The map and the feeling arrive together. You experience them as a single sensation, recognition. Now, imagine the cable between those two regions gets cut. Maybe a stroke, maybe a head injury, maybe the slow corrosion of Alzheimer's. The face still arrives in the fusiform gyrus. You can still see your wife. You can describe every freckle. But the warm rush from the amygdala never comes. There is no flicker, no hum of belonging. Your conscious mind is left with a sentence that should not be possible. This person looks exactly like my wife, but she does not feel like my wife. The brain, hating contradiction, reaches for an explanation. And the only one that fits is the worst one. She must be a fake. But here is where it gets strange. There is another, much more famous condition called prosopagnosia, face blindness. Brad Pitt has it. The late neurologist Oliver Sacks had it. Prosopagnostics cannot recognize faces. Their own mother walks past them on the street, and they feel nothing, no map, no name. They have to identify her by her voice or her coat. For most of the 20th century, neurologists assumed prosopagnosia and Capgras were unrelated. One was a failure of vision. The other was a failure of belief. Then in 1990, two British psychologists, Hayden Ellis and Andrew Young, published a paper that turned the whole field upside down. They argued Capgras was not a failure of belief at all. It was the exact mirror image of prosopagnosia. In prosopagnosia, the conscious recognition fails. but tests show the patient's body still has emotional reactions to loved ones. Their palms sweat. Their pulse rises. They feel without knowing. In Capgras, it is the opposite. They know without feeling. The face is recognized perfectly, but the body does not flinch. The warmth is gone, and without the warmth, the face becomes a mask. In 1997, a neuroscientist named V.S. Ramachandran at the University of California, San Diego, decided to test that idea directly. He recruited a young man, known in his papers as DS, who had developed Capgras after a car accident left him with a head injury. DS was certain his parents had been replaced. Ramachandran and his collaborator William Herstein hooked DS up to a galvanic skin response meter, a small device that measures tiny shifts in sweat on your fingertips when you see something emotionally charged. And they showed him photographs. Strangers, celebrities, his own parents. In a healthy brain, the skin response spikes hard for loved ones. It is involuntary. It is the body's way of saying, this matters. DS's skin response was flat, not just for his parents, for everyone. The emotional channel had been severed. But here was the cruelest detail. When his mother spoke to him on the telephone, without seeing her face, DS recognized her instantly and without doubt. The voice pathway to the amygdala was intact. Only the visual channel had been cut. He could love his mother through a phone, but not in a room. And just when you think we have figured it out, the syndrome keeps unfolding. Some Capgras patients do not just see imposter parents. They see imposter pets. Their dog of 12 years walks in, and they recoil. That is not Rex, that is a clone. Some see an imposter in the mirror, a phenomenon doctors call mirrored self-misidentification. They look at their own reflection and feel a stranger staring back. There are documented cases where patients believe their house has been replaced by an identical replica, down to the cracked tile in the bathroom. There are cases where patients fixate on a single imposter, only the husband, never the children. There are cases where the imposter changes. The husband on Monday is not the husband on Tuesday, who is not the husband on Wednesday. Each one a new double. And there are heartbreaking accounts from family members who try to prove who they are. The patient nods. They concede the imposter knows everything the real person would know. The imposter is, they admit, an extraordinarily good copy. But that, the patient explains gently, is exactly how you would know it was a fake. Right now, in your skull, this is happening every second. Every face you look at is being silently weighed for warmth. You are not aware of it. You will never be aware of it unless something inside that wiring breaks. Capgras is rare in healthy brains, but it is not rare in the world. Roughly 1 in 6 patients with Alzheimer's disease and a smaller fraction with Lewy body dementia will develop a Capgras-like delusion at some point in their illness. For their families, it is the worst grief of all, to walk into the room of someone you have loved for 40 years and to be looked at as a stranger, as a threat, to be accused of impersonating yourself. But Capgras also tells us something larger and harder to admit. Your sense of who someone is, your husband, your mother, your child, is not really a product of their face. It is the warm hum that arrives alongside their face. Pull that hum out, and the person dissolves. Which means recognition in the human brain is not seeing. Recognition is feeling. And the moment you stop feeling, the world becomes full of imposters. A century after Madame M walked into that Paris police station, we finally know what she could not explain. The husband she could not believe in was real. The 80 imposters she counted in her city were ghosts inside her own brain, fragments of a love that no longer reached her. She was not lying. She was not psychotic in the old, exotic sense. She was the first witness to a wire come loose in the cathedral of human connection. Her face recognition worked. Her memory worked. But the warmth, the quiet, invisible heat that tells us this is mine had gone cold. And so the world doubled. And every person she had ever loved became a copy of themselves. The illusion of doubles. That was the name Capgras gave it in 1923. He could not have known he was naming, for the first time, the exact place inside us where feeling and seeing tear apart. If this rewired the way you think about your own brain, wait until you meet Capgras Syndrome, the patient who walks into a hospital and calmly explains that she has been dead for several months. Same brain, same wiring problem, different missing signal. The next video goes deep into the strangest delusion in psychiatric history, and a woman whose corpse kept showing up to her own doctor's appointments. Thanks for watching. If this sparked a question, drop it in the comments. It might be your next video. We'll see you next time.